So I've had the Specialized Kenevo Comp 2021 model for just over a year now, and I thought it was probably about time I did a small review and shared my opinions on this bike. So this bike being my first proper e-bike, I can't really compare it to anything else. The YT decoy that I did test, that was over 6 months before purchasing this bike, so that doesn't really count. Coming from a normal analog bike background, this e-bike is completely new to me and quite a game-changing experience in some ways. So to make things easy, I'll start off with the good points that I think this bike has, but this is just purely my experience and some of the good and bad points I've picked up in my experience of riding the bike. The good points for me are, first off, the alley frame. So the benefits of an alley frame are it's more environmentally friendly, it keeps manufacturing costs down, which hopefully ends with the consumer getting a cheaper bike than a carbon framed bike. But in terms of this aluminium frame, I think it's quite a neat design in terms of the welds. They look quite good compared to some other bikes that I have seen. So I'm quite happy with running an aluminium frame. If there is a weight saving to be had by carbon on a full fat e-bike like this, I don't think it's really going to be noticeable or worthwhile. This bike was a sensible price. When I was looking at it, it was £5,500. The next day I went back on the website. This is November 2020. I went back on the website and the price had risen by £300 as a result of the pandemic boom in cycling interest. So yeah, £300 overnight. Nevertheless, I made my purchase, so it cost me £5,800. Since then, the new model, which has some slight differences, has jumped to £6,400, so a further £600 increase. But nevertheless, I think it still represents good value for an e-bike in today's market. The battery being removable was another pro for me. It means you can take it in the house and keep it in a more controlled temperature climate, which will obviously prolong the life of the battery, but also you can charge it indoors if you don't have a charging point outside without bringing the bike inside. Also, different battery options. So this comp model coming with the 500 watt hour battery, but the expert model coming with the 700 means that there is room to up the battery capacity if I found the 500 watt hour battery not to have enough charge for the type of rides that I go on. But so far the 500 watt hour battery has done plenty of long enough rides for me, but it's nice to know that there is a larger capacity battery should I want to do more longer rides. Another good point was the SWAT tool and the bottle cage which came with the bike. It's a nice little touch, and the SWAT tool has got me out of trouble on quite a few occasions. Comfortable seat, the most comfortable seat I've had on a bike to date. I know it's an e-bike specific seat, but it just has the right shape to it for me and also the right amount of padding. The confidence over rough terrain and when you're jumping is definitely inspiring. For me personally, I'm not the most confident or experienced riders when it comes to jumps or pure downhill rough terrain riding, so this bike adds that extra level of confidence. The other plus point for going for a bike that you can purchase at a bike shop in the UK, such as a Specialized dealer, is the warranty and support. The first ride on this bike, the air shock blew up and failed, and I had to send it off for warranty, which I have to admit did take about a month. I sent a shock to Specialized sent it to whoever the Fox warranty department is, and they got it repaired from there. It wasn't the end of the world for me because I did have another bike. I also had just purchased a second-hand coil shock that I was curious to try out, but I can understand that would have been quite a big issue for someone if that was their only bike and they were perhaps planning on going on a bike trip and then the shock blew up. Not ideal, but the process was pretty slick, I guess, and the communication was great. So that is a plus point. And of course, you can just take the bike into your local Specialized dealer and let them have a look at it, which is something that's nice to have and something you don't get from the mail order bike companies. Okay, so those are the good points that I can think of for this bike. I'm going to go through the bad point, or shall we say negative points, maybe slightly negative, slightly bad. The bike has the Mazzocchi Bomber fork, which is basically, as far as I'm aware, a Fox 36. So it's still a good fork, and at the time, you know, probably one of the best forks you could have. So when you're talking full fat, heavyweight, 24 kilo e-bikes such as this, really it needs to have the stiffer fork, in my opinion. So that is something that I've kind of noticed, because my latest analog bike, the Forbidden Dreadnought, has a 38 on the front, and I probably would have noticed the difference had I not switched between the e-bike and the normal bike. So now I kind of feel like this bike should have a 38mm or a dual crown fork on it. Maybe one day I'll upgrade and go for a Zeb or a 38, but at the moment it doesn't bother me too much. It's just something that would be nice to have. The low front end is not necessarily a bad point, because obviously that is personal preference, but for me I do prefer to have a slightly higher riding position. The long chainstays, which again aid climbing, aid stability when you're descending. However, it does make it hard to get the front wheel off the ground, and also it's not the most agile of bikes or playful during, you know, through the slower turns and stuff. But again, that is personal preference. The battery connection is prone to getting kind of dirt build up in there. I don't really know what you can do to stop that. You just have to be very careful when you're cleaning it that you get a good connection and that no water gets inside there. Mud build up in the chainstay area. It's a little bit of an issue, and I did change to I think it's Psycho MTB mudguard, which helps to keep most of the debris and crap out of the chainstay area. Another thing is the 200mm brake rotors. In all of the reviews pretty much that I've read and watched, most people commented on the fact that it was hard to slow the bike down with the brakes, the Kodar brakes. Now for me, I was a fan of Hope, and I still am. So the first thing I did was got rid of the Kodar brakes, sold them straight away, and put Hope V4s on, and I went for a Hope 220mm rotor on the front. I thought I would see how I got on with that, and to be honest, it's been pretty much perfect. The new model does come with a 220mm rotor on the front, so obviously Specialized have realised that and they've made the change. So for the new model, if that's what you're looking at getting, I would say it's probably going to be fine. The grips are a little bit too thick for my preference, although on longer rides I guess the extra surface area padding is probably better for your hands. For me, I do prefer the thinner grips, such as the Santa Cruz grips and the ones that came on my Forbidden. When I received this bike as well, it came with inner tubes in. Obviously for most people you probably want to run the setup with tubeless. So although it says tubeless ready on the tyres and the rims, when I took the tubes out, changed the valves and put the sealant in, I had quite a trouble sealing the wheels. One of them in particular, I can't remember if it was the front or the rear, but it would be a case of leaving it overnight, it would come back the next day and it's completely flat. Eventually it did seal, and it's been fine since. But yeah, it wasn't the smoothest process compared to some of the other wheels that I've converted to tubeless and had, you know, good experiences with. So they are my good points and bad points for the Specialized Kenevo. All in all, I would say this is a pretty fantastic bike. The bike is capable of going on cross-country rides, downhill. You can do kind of enduro on it. There's not much you can't really do on this bike, I guess, for an e-bike. Pretty much a good all-round bike. Yeah, if I could change one thing, it would be that fork. I would go to a 38, as I said earlier. I've got many more rides planned this year for this bike, so I'm hoping I can get a lot more trouble-free miles in. But yeah, fingers crossed. I'm gonna have to watch this space. But that's my review of the Specialized Kenevo. Hopefully it's been of help to some of you or of use, and if you're in the market for one of these bikes, be it used or new, then I think it is definitely a good option.